Joining us with those updates. Now, as the battle over America's H-1B visa program escalates, pitting innovation against immigration crackdowns, just weeks into President Trump's second term, his September 19th proclamation slapped a staggering $100,000 one-time fee on new H-1B petitions for workers abroad, ballooning total cost to over $102,000 and sparking fury from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. Tech giants like Google and Meta warn it could get U.S. competitiveness, forcing talent flight to Canada and Europe, while immigrant advocates decry it as a tax on dreams. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce called it economic self-sabotage, citing disrupted hires in healthcare and education, out of which 33% of H-1Bs aren't even tech roles. On October 3rd, a powerhouse coalition united auto workers, teachers' unions, nurse agencies, universities, and even churches, who all filed the first lawsuit in San Francisco federal court. They argue Trump overreached, imposing an unconstitutional tax without Congress's nod or public input, potentially breeding corruption via national interest waivers. As suits mount, eyes have now turned to alternatives. Canada's express entry, uncapped PR in months for $1,100, or Germany's EU blue card at under $500 during STEM pros with fast tracks. Joining us live to discuss this story in greater detail is Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee, former diplomat. Professor Madhav Nalapath, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is with us live. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, is joining us live. Dr. Kohli, senior economist, also joins us on the broadcast. Dr. Sharath Kohli, let me begin with you first. What do you believe are the economic implications for the U.S. as a result of this H-1B freeze or stringency that the United States has implemented?
Good evening, Uday, to you, my fellow panelists and NewsX viewers. I think the implications, we've been talking about implications on India, when the Indian techies will not be able to go and so forth. That applies to the new applications. But not many people analyze, and I'm glad you're doing a show on this, not many people analyze that the implications are far greater on America. Well, America runs on a system that has been designed by the Indian tech experts. Not from now. It's been like that for last more than 20 years. In fact, you take out the Indian tech minds from America, and it's not just like that, that most of the tech companies are headed by Indians as CEOs. So if you take out the tech mind, the Indian tech minds out of the US, and you take out doctors, the Indian doctors out of the US, I can guarantee you, US will come to a standstill. America Online, although American Online is a website as well, but America's online proposition, America's entire online ecosystem is backed by, controlled by Indian minds, which have gone from here either now or probably a few years ago. They now hold passports, or they are working on H-1B visas. Well, as far as India is concerned, India is going to be a gainer, because these people, if they are not able to go there, this is what will happen. The American companies will have to still continue to outsource testing, coding, whatever they've been doing, notwithstanding the threat from AI. I'm keeping that aside for now. I did a separate show on AI on your channel, discussing about the ramifications. But then the processes will continue. What will happen is these processes will land up in Bangalore, in Pune, in Gurugram, and other places in India. So effectively, the process will go on. The only difference would be that the service manager or the person will not be on site. So anyway, we are moving on from on-site to off-site concept. As the technology is evolving, it is becoming off-site. And as far as the Indian techies who've got the American dreams, I've been talking to a lot of techies in Bangalore who said that we had this American dream, we did our software engineering or whatever, that we'll probably go and work in America and never come back to India. From a point of view, I'm glad that, the patriotism towards the country and being in the country, the brain drain at least will not happen. That's one, although you can continue to function. And why forget today that America is not the end of the world. There's Japan, there's Germany, there's Canada, there's Europe, there's Australia. If you still have a foreign dream, you want to go to your dream destination overseas, you still have, obviously the salaries may not match, the job profile may not exactly be the same, may or may not be the same, but then America is not the end of the world. I still fail to understand personally, Uday, notwithstanding companies like TCS, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, Wipro, who have been used to over the last 30-35 years working in America, outsourcing those. But the fact of the matter is that these jobs are now getting eaten away by AI. So anyway, this was not a sustainable model. You know, a lot of jobs of these coding and testing, client servicing, they have gone to AI now. So this wasn't going to last for too long anyway. But President Trump has put a fast forward button because more than 70% come from India. Obviously, he had India in mind. This was again an indirect target on India without naming India. But the fact of the matter is that America is going to be a greater sufferer than India, Uday, and Indians don't have to lose heart. There is rest of the world to explore, and let's wait and see. I think over the next few months, you'll come to know what are the final implications. Who's the actual loser? Who's the actual gainer, Uday?
Ambassador Bhashpati Mukherjee, let me also quickly draw you in here on what you make, of course, of these legal challenges that this legislation is facing in the US. Whether you believe such an order will continue in the long term, or is this something just stopgap done to appease the vote base of the American president? And long term also, what you see happening to the H-1B seekers? Will they move to different shores?
But first of all, Uday, I'd like to say that I completely agree with my co-panelist, Dr. Sharad Kohli, who just spoke, and to add a few points in response to your question. In the first instance, those who already have H-1B visas are not affected. They were affected earlier. For 24 hours, there was complete panic. And then it was clarified that it's for those who are applying now. So those who are already there are not affected. Those who want to go will have to look for other destinations, because the amount of money which is being demanded, and now they say that it's one status, is absolutely like extortion. There's no question of being able to pay so much of money when you're a young guy looking to work and settle wherever you want to settle. So there are two options ahead of H-1B seekers, future seekers. One is, as Dr. Kohli said, there are many options, and many countries actually are utilizing President Trump's ultimatum to offer Indian H-1B seekers safe havens. It's not just Germany. There's Canada, there's Japan, there's Singapore, there's of course Australia, and there is also the option, as Dr. Kohli pointed out, of working in India offline, online for American companies. Will this be sustained in court? That is something which many Americans tell me that it is unlikely, that it is highly possible that the courts will turn it down, because it seems that President Trump may have exceeded his powers by doing what he did. So we have to watch and wait this out. But in the meantime also, it is a call on all of us in India to bring up our kids in a way that they also look to fulfill their dreams in India and not fulfill America's dreams. When they went to fulfill America's dreams, India was a very poor country and could not offer much. That is not true anymore. So since there is also an Indian dream, why not encourage our tech companies, our government?
So quick follow-up question to you then, Ambassador Mukherjee, based on what you're saying. Rather than Canada or Germany get these prospective H-1Bs, you believe a reverse brain drain should happen to India, rather than say a Canada or a Germany, if not the US? Ambassador Mukherjee?
I'm sorry, I thought the question was directed.
No. I said, just as a follow-up to what you said, you believe a reverse brain drain should happen to India, rather than say Canada or Germany, who might benefit because of the US's stringent regulations.
I believe that should happen, and it is happening. It is even highly ironical, for instance, that even the Chinese have offered us fast-track visas, and they're telling Indians to come and work in China. And that can also happen. You can't rule it out. China has a lot to offer, and Indians have no difficulty in going to China. I am told by friends of mine who lived in China for many years, and on my many visits to China, that they are pretty okay with Indians. They don't have any racial bias or any problem at all. They work very long hours, just like Indians do. So it's not an issue at all. I was adding there that many of my friends with whom I've discussed, including big corporates, or I'm sure Dr. Kohli would agree with me, that this provides us an opportunity to do some reform at home and encourage our young minds who are so talented also to stay back, provided we can offer them good opportunities to stay. And many, as you know, Uday, after they've spent maybe 12 years in US, I know many who've come back and settled in Bengaluru, etc. And and I've done shows with them. They said that at a certain point of time, the American dream is now jaded. They want to come back to India and do what they want. They have saved the necessary money to have a good life here. And actually, you can even have a good life without that money saved. You and I are good examples. There are people who not worked in US, we worked in India, and we enjoy our good life in India. So this is what we need to also educate parents, not to keep on encouraging their children to just go and settle abroad, but to try and inculcate in them some feeling of nationalism towards their own country, to say the country that made you what you are, that country also needs its young folks to stay here so as to make India great again. Why should we all only make America great again? Why can't we work to make India great? Not
Okay.
again, India great. We
Okay.
didn't become great because we were colonized. We should
Okay,
become
so no more MAGA, let's do MIGA, is what you're clearly saying. Okay, let me get in Professor Nalapat at that point. Professor Nalapat, firstly, do you believe this legal hurdle is pretty sound for this legislation in the United States of America? Do you see this continuing long term in the US, or do you believe it could perhaps be struck down eventually by the US Supreme Court? Also, what other implications, ramifications do you believe such a stringent order is going to have?
Well, the fact of the matter is, Uday, that this order is unconstitutional. And the judges who have been appointed to the Supreme Court by President Trump are strict constitutionalists. They go by the Constitution. So I can't believe, quite frankly, that they're going to say that the president has unlimited powers. The president is a dictator who can override the judiciary, override the legislature whenever he or she wants. I think that is an absurdity, and it is completely violative of the US Constitution. So you remember long back there was a Dred Scott decision, and there was Chief Justice Taney, and he has forever been tainted along with his court for that Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott was a slave who escaped to freedom in a free state, and what happened? He was returned back by the US Supreme Court under Justice Taney. Justice Taney has had a stain on his reputation as is his court for a long time, and frankly, I don't believe the current court is ever going to go that way. I think they're strict constitutionalists. You may have one or two holdouts maximum, but quite frankly, the Supreme Court operates by majority judgment, and it doesn't operate by consensus. So even those one or two are not going to make much difference to the 9 justices who are there. There'll be a 7-2 maximum. In my view, 7-1. Justice Thomas may stand with Trump, but I don't believe anybody else will. So the reality is, it's a question of time. Already courts have started striking down various parts of the Trump situation. And for example, this ending of birthright citizenship, another something which is completely unlawful, and which I don't believe the US Supreme Court is going to uphold. I mean, this Trump's doctrine is that of unlimited power. Now, I want to just say that so far as President Trump is concerned, quite frankly, people in the United States are seriously worried about where the direction in which he's leading the country. And the reality is that there's a lot of pressure on his administration. People are not talking to him directly, but they're talking to his cabinet, including those members whom he tasked with attacking India, and they're warning that they'll be hell to pay. For example, in the hospital sector, in the red states, that is the Republican states, if you take out Indian doctors, I mean, your healthcare system there will collapse. The tech industry will go through a similar collapse if this is really enforced. And education is another sector, very frankly, which will immediately suffer very badly. and the US will lose quality students from across the world that is getting now, and it'll lose them to Canada, Australia, Germany. Germany is offering some very, very attractive conditions for Indians who want to study there. One thing, the education is free, and secondly, you're given a path to doing a job. Frankly, Uday, everybody likes Indians. The reality is, per capita, the crime rate is among the lowest in the Indian community who are resident in any country, absolutely lowest. You're not going to come across a member of the Indian community committing the sort of hate crime you saw, for example, just taking place a few, I mean, almost less than a day before in Manchester. You won't see that happen. And that's one reason why countries across the world are welcoming India. And I fully agree with the ambassador that this is a very good chance for Prime Minister Modi to completely, reform whatever is left to be reformed, the regulatory system, the tax system, to make India an attractive destination for inward investment. And not just investment by NRIs, but investment from non-NRIs as well, investment from Indian citizens as well. So I am very hopeful that this kind of reform is going to come, and I'm also very hopeful of the fact that in the United States, the pushback against President Trump's tariff have already started, and already he's having to carve out exemptions in one sector or the other. And what happens is the tariff goes widely reported. The sections that are carved out, that is this exemption, that exemption, are hardly reported. So we don't hear about them. But the reality is that eventually, as you correctly said, the US courts are the bulwark of the judicial system, and they will not stand with this doctrine of unbridled presidential power.
Yes. What would be your advice, Gautam Mukherjee, to prospective H-1B seekers from India who are worried, troubled, families concerned right now, confused also? What would be your advice, Gautam Mukherjee, on this scenario currently and what to do?
Well, I think I recently wrote an article on this very topic. It is to do with innovation centers. The top part of the IT work is being conducted in America, and the grunt work is being done by the Indians because they're cheaper. And it's partly political because, if the top quality work is also farmed out, then they lose control of the ship. Now what the Americans have already started talking about is moving their development centers to India and to other places where the tax laws and the liberal facilities, for example Dubai, are adequate for them to operate and have the best of both worlds. That is, Indian staffing, because it's a hop, step, and jump, and top quality development centers in the vicinity, which dodges Trump's H-1B tax completely. It isn't just the Indians who are affected by it. It is the companies which normally pay for it. And if it's an American company paying for it, and if you're saying, okay, you're not applying it to the current visa holders, that's also like saying, I won't let you grow. So they are as interested as we are in finding another way out. And then, as many of the other panelists have said, we could, have PLIs and such like to have Indian innovation centers with collaborations sometimes with it. If the Germans want to collaborate, they welcome Canadians, Australians, Chinese, anybody really who is on board with our vision can cooperate and set up, and we can actually hijack the whole business of innovation, because it is, as Sharad pointed out, run by Indians anyway. What we do is just geographically move it to either India or a variety of countries that are willing to cooperate with India. The engine is in Indian hands. They're the ones who can make this happen wherever they are forced to go. Now, the last point is if Indians want to go and live in America, maybe that is affected, and there is no answer to that right now. What the American courts will do and so on is their business. If they work it out, well and good. It doesn't really enter into the policy matrix for India and for others who wish to exploit the situation to their favor. And I think this is a golden opportunity to do so. Uday.
It indeed is. And is it already being done, Dr. Kohli? What are the kind of reports you are getting from prospective H-1Bs? Are they considering other pastures apart from the US? Are they relooking now at India itself? Will this reverse brain drain happen? Will this become the new trend now for this decade, or not quite?
Of course, yes. The corporates that I spoke to thereafter, they are first trying to find alternates because they've got projects in hand and they want to complete those projects. So L1 is one of the options. Well, L1 means you should be having a subsidiary and the person should have worked for one more year in another country. So it's a bit tough. It doesn't apply to everybody else. But yes, they've started looking to alternate pastures, and companies are setting up counseling cells for these people to see that what Gautam said very correctly, that they went there for quality of life. They went there for children's education. They went there for health facilities. So companies are trying to counsel. We will try and get you here. Please be convinced to work here. We will get orders from the American companies to be outsourced to India. And I think the biggest mistake President Trump is doing is he's failing to find out whether it comes to tariffs or H-1B visas. He failed to take the pulse of the nation. Probably some rural areas in America may be favoring it.
Right.
But whether he has Americans to substitute either the goods factories or the H-1B visa holders, so that's the billion-dollar question.
Okay, let me leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion. Now, the TCS layoffs row has escalated. NewsX is